Hello and welcome to the Lion's Den episode 2, where today we are going to be talking about one of my current lists that has been performing at a reasonably high level, and we're going to break that down, see what's going right, what's going wrong, what changes I've made over the course of playing that army, and then we're going to have a little chat about matchups and where the list is currently. I'm Toby Bennett from Black Crow Gaming, and I'm currently the number 2 ranked ITC player for Dark Angels, and number 3 ranked UKTC player, and also purveyor of stupid opinions. So hopefully we're going to have some fun, and we'll have a good time with this episode. First of all, thank you so much for all the positive feedback that we've had on the first episode of the Lion's Den. It's been absolutely incredible, and a huge appreciation to everyone that got involved, made sure that they were telling me what they wanted to see, what they didn't want to see, and telling me that my audio was absolute garbage, which it was. You were not wrong at all. So hopefully we're going to be a little bit better in this episode. So hopefully people will enjoy it. But yeah, again, like, comment, subscribe, tell me what you think in the section below. But we are going to jump straight on into lists. So here we have the DILF Brigade. Those that know me will know that I always name my list something like the Lion is a DILF, or I play Dark Angels because the Lion is a DILF, because whenever I do well at a tournament, and people then want to review those lists, they have to then read those names out on their stream, and that always just gives me a little bit of a kick, probably because I'm a massive child, but it's something that I really enjoy, and hopefully something that you enjoy as well. So without further ado, the list. Azrael. I think everyone's playing him at the moment. Almost certainly going to get a points increase at the next Munitorum Field Manual. 105 points for an extra CP, sustained hits for a squad, 4-up Invuln for a squad, 4-up Feel No Pain to mortal wounds at one time in the game. And he's an absolute beast as well with his, his 2-shot rapid fire 1 strength 8 weapon, which also has dev wounds and anti-infantry 4 and AP -3 just in case. So really powerful model. Also absolutely no slouch in combat. So Azrael, he is almost always the first name on a Dark Angels list that you write because of that extra CP generation, and just that ability to give a unit which is usually less durable that bit of extra durability just to keep it in the fight. Speaking of giving units extra durability, we're going to be talking about these 2 librarians. Now, they are probably my favourite character at the moment, next to sort of Azrael, and that is because they give a unit a 4+ invulnerable save and a 4-up Feel No Pain to psychic attacks. So twofold there. It makes a weak unit, because most Space Marines are 3-up save T4, so weak defensive stats unit like Inner Circle Companions, and gives them that 4-up invulnerable save, so they are far more survivable. And then I don't know about you, but during Leviathan I was absolutely menaced by Thousand Suns. That matchup was always my worst. Absolute nightmare for Redemptors, just having their saves turned off. I know slightly different now, but still, there was a lot of reasons to really not enjoy that matchup. Mortal wounds were the way to beat the kind of the -1 damage lists. And Librarians give a 4-up Feel No Pain to that. And since Thousand Suns are still one of the premier armies, they are still running around highly technical lists. This throws a massive spanner in the works. We're like, well, my 2 Death Squads have a 4-up Feel No Pain to most of your best weapons, especially Magnus, which obviously is a huge problem. He's one of the most difficult models to deal with coming out of that list. So really important there. They are pretty weak in combat, but just 4 attacks, D3 damage. D3 damage is actually quite handy because sometimes that's good into other -1 damage, and because so much of this list is 2 damage, it's actually quite a decent ability. So quite handy there from the Librarian. But that little bit of extra shooting ability from the Librarian, which is their Smite, which is D6. You're always overcharging, let's be honest. So hazardous, dev wounds, strength 6, AP 2, and I believe it's damage 2. I think, yeah, damage 2. We're going to go with that. So really good little bit of chip damage that you can throw in. 24-inch range on that. Really nice. But really, the reason that you are playing those Librarians is for that survivability for your Inner Circle companions. And then finally, we're going to talk about probably one of the premier reasons to play Gladius, which is the I probably should have said that this list is in the Gladius detachment, but it's a lieutenant or lieutenant if you are American, with fire discipline. So what fire discipline does is it gives the squad sustained hits 1, and it gives the squad crits on 5s during the devastated doctrine, and then obviously the lieutenant himself gives lethal hits to the squad, so you're both lethaling and exploding on 5s during the devastated doctrine. So really powerful ability, and what he's going to do is he's going to stand with those Hellblasters, the big 10 mana Hellblasters, and just the sheer amount of damage output that they put out, also while being offset by having 33% of their hits, usually with Oath of Moment, go straight through. It offsets that weaker strength that Plasma has suffered with during sort of that transition from 9th to 10th, where it was wounding basically everything on 4s, and now it's wounding most tanks on 5s. So still very good into infantry and even elite infantry, and still very strong into tanks because of that mix of lethal hits and just sheer rate of fire. Also very, very handy in Overwatch, but we'll come on to that later. Then we've got an Assault Intercessor squad, classic battle line. They're re-rolling wounds on objectives, so they've got a Thunderhammer to fish for those dev wounds. Now, this is Azrael's home if I don't believe that the Hellblasters need that 4-up invulnerable save. So if I've got Azrael and the Lieutenant in the same squad, obviously we are wasting resources there because Azrael gives sustained hits, as does Fire Discipline. And I don't like wasting resources. However, a lot of the time that 4-up invulnerable save on the Hellblasters is so important just to keep them in the fight, as we keep on discussing, because 3-up save, 4-up toughness, 4 toughness is not a good defensive profile in the current meta. There's so many ways just to absolutely slaughter it, as we're going to discuss. So sometimes Azrael will go with those Assault Intercessors because he himself is pretty handy with re-rolling wounds, given that his sword is devastating wounds in combat, and at strength 6, just giving it that a bit of extra re-rolls alongside that AP -4, really quite handy. But they're 2 OC unit. They're very sacrificial. They're a 75-point unit. If you want to toss them up the board and go, okay, now you come kill these, and then I'll countercharge you, that's kind of their job. And you've got a classic Intercessor squad, so just another source of battle line, because obviously battle line is a lot more relevant in the Pariah Nexus mission pack. But they're also giving sticky objectives, so they sticky that home objective early, which means you can move off it. You don't need to have anything holding on it, which is pretty essential when you get to the sort of the closing out of a game, where people start throwing those units forward to try and wring every last bit of advantage. If those reserves have all come in, they've got no uppy downies, so you don't have to worry about deep strike. This is when Intercessors can go forward, another 10 OC unit, and also just gives you that little bit of extra play, either going to try and do a secret mission where you need battle line to survive in no man's land, or if you're trying to stop your opponent from scoring that secret mission, which is usually the more relevant with this list because it does tend to score primary quite quickly and quite early. So just having those extra bit of battle line, there's nothing wrong with it. It's another real positive. Okay, so now one of the more important things, again, with this Dark Angels list is making sure that its uber killer units, because they are infantry, are still alive when they get to your opponent, because losing an Inner Circle companion, you lose 5 attacks or 4 attacks depending on which profile you're picking, which is a heck of a lot of potential damage. That's 8 potential damage just from the one of those ICC guys dying. So we've got 2 impulsors. Now there are arguments to go with a more aggressive profile with the impulsors. I choose shield domes just to give me that 5-up invuln, because sometimes you spike 5-ups. Just again, we're really focusing in on that survivability. Now, I don't think that there's anything wrong with arguing that the anti-fly guns would be a bad idea. So the Icarus, it's I think 8 shots, sustained hits 1, and anti-fly 4. Now something like that is actually kind of solid into things like Catan, which is relevant. There's lots of flying things going around at the moment, so that is definitely something that if you feel like you need to be a little bit more aggressive with those impulsors, or if you're not feeling so threatened by lots of las cannons or similar, where you can just kind of go, okay, well, it's only ever pushing me to a 5-up on my save anyway, that's fine. Go with the Icarus. I personally go with the shield domes. Part of that was because that's how I originally modelled my impulsors, which is incredibly relevant. Sometimes you just don't build the other thing and you don't magnetize. Should always magnetize, but sometimes, particularly when you start off before you get competitive, you haven't magnetized. So yeah, shield dome for me, 5-up invuln. Solid choice. Impulsor is so good at getting the ICCs up the board. That's the inner circle companions, by the way. ICCs up the board and into your opponent's face, because the turn that they jump out of that impulsor, because they disembark 3, and they do have to disembark wholly within 3, they essentially have a 9-inch movement from the furthest point of that impulsor. Now, obviously, that was a bit better previously, because the pivot rule allowed us to go, well, I'm going to now pivot my impulsor for free because it's on a circular base, so that I can get a certain part of the impulsor as far forward as possible. Now, you can't do that anymore. That does cost the 2 inches of movement. So that trick has gone. Do remember that. Don't get caught out by trying to do that, because it unfortunately just isn't something you can do anymore. I think most people would let you go back those 2 inches and then twist, but let's just be careful with that as much as we possibly can be. However, giving those ICCs that 9-inch move, really powerful. Another little tip, if you are in a really heavy combat meta, you can switch out that Librarian for a Judicia, and that's going to give you fights first on the ICC unit. Personally, I don't think that's survivable enough, but if you are in like a really heavy combat meta, there's definitely an argument to be said for it. Now, if you do that, you can advance your impulsor and then jump out your ICC unit with their fights first ability and go, all right, come on then, charge me, see what happens. So there's definitely some play there. However, obviously this list doesn't do that, because I've opted for that survivability in the face of shooting, just because I'm tailoring to the metas that are around me at the moment. I think there's still some people that are a bit hungover from Leviathan. So it's important to kind of acknowledge, okay, I'm expecting that I'm going to be coming up against, say, 4 combat armies and only 1 shooting army. This is the correct decision to put in that fights first instead. However, in my context, it is that Librarian. Moving on to my other data sheets. So we're going to go with the mission scoring sections first. Now, it's 2 jump pack intercessors. And 2 units of scouts. Those units are hands down the best scoring units that Space Marines have access to right now. Jump pack intercessors moving 12 and doing mortal wounds on their charge is extremely powerful. 80 points for that unit, it is just flat undercosted. They are, I think they are, again, like Azrael, one of the first names that I always write down on my sheet. And that's because they can do damage to anything. They're efficiently scoring me points. They don't need to advance because they're going 12 anyway. And they also have a huge threat range in the advance and charge turn that I do get from Gladius. So really big there. And they've also got a couple of plasma pistols. No harm having strength 8, 2 damage weapons, and a power fist as well on the sergeant. And also just the sheer number of attacks coming out of them. They've got 16 chainsword attacks coming. If you do get in there into sort of, you know, your light infantry, your medium infantry, they can do a heck of a lot of damage. So in terms of dealing with your opponent's screen as well, so if they've got their own scouts or if they've got units like that, your jump pack intercessors are really efficient at doing that. Now, the latter unit that we're going to discuss for scoring points is scouts. Now, they have, I think, probably currently the most important keyword in the game, and that is infiltrate. Scouts, infiltrate, and scout 6, which allows you to be a little bit more aggressive with that deployment. The way that I do it is I'll measure out exactly 5 inches away from a building edge, and I'll go, okay, if I'm going first, I will scout wherever I want. If I'm going second, these guys are going to run back or run forward, depending on what the safest way to do it is, and they're going to be 1 inch away from that wall. Well, 1.1 inch, so that they can't be charged through that wall if you're not playing WTC rules. Obviously, if you are playing the WTC mission pack, that is slightly different. Be aware of that. However, if you're playing standard Games Workshop rules, be 1.1 inches away from the wall with your scouts. They are then safe because they can't be shot because they're obscured, and then they can also not be charged, which is really, really handy because they are going to be scoring you a lot of points. What you can also do is infiltrate them aggressively and then scout them forward and then use them to start pinning key opponent resources in their deployment zone. So a really good example of this is Necron destroyers. So Necron heavy destroyers and Lockhurst destroyers really struggle in combat. So if you're able to get these guys forward quickly, and then if your opponent's maybe misdeployed a little bit, you can get them into combat and you can lock up that unit, which is really, really handy, just to kind of slow your opponent down, stop them from throwing out their objective. But if you can also do it where you end up with these scouts in front of enemy tanks. Yes, they're going to die, but they pin them for a turn. And if your opponent is playing the game for 4 turns rather than 5, it usually means that you're going to win purely by outscoring them. When I was playing the far worse list of Dark Angels Firestorm, my ability to infiltrate and scout block my opponent was so important, and I don't think that's changed much. You look at things like World Eaters, if they're having to scout things like Jackals first rather than those 8-bound, it's buying you that bit of extra time, right? So it's just about working where you can kind of be on the board, where you can control. Speaking of where you are on the board and scoring points, scouts also have the uppy downy ability, which means that if they are more than 6 inches away from any enemy unit, they can go up and back into reserves and then come in from strategic reserves. Really handy that, because it means you can get around the board. You can constantly be going, I need my opponent to be thinking about what happens if I put 5 scouts right behind them on their backfield and threaten them that way. These scouts are no slouches in combat, and with the sniper and the missile launcher, they can actually do quite a lot of damage to like individual characters, lone ops, or they can just get in combat and be kind of frustrating. You know, between the 4 attacks with the chainsaw and the 3 with the knives, they're actually pretty decent. I think one of my proudest moments, this isn't this particular list, but a scout came up at the end, came within 9 of, well, not 9, came just outside of 9 of Cypher, shot him with a missile, hit him, wounded him, he failed his 4-up, and then they roll 5 damage on the damage roll, killing him outright on turn 1. So absolutely beautiful. One of my favourite moments in any of my games so far. Really, really cool. So Scouts, surprisingly good bang for their buck at 65 points, a unit that you don't care if you toss them away, and really useful at either keeping your opponent honest and in their deployment zone, or keeping your opponent behind you in score by getting them into those places where you don't mind them doing actions, or they can just go to an objective, score the thing that you need to score, and then quite happily die. So, you know, there's definitely options there, which is really, really important. So then we're really going to get to the meat of the list. Now, the 3 units that are going to be really key for you and that are going to be doing the most damage. So we're going to start with the Deathwing Knights. So these guys have kind of been the poster boys of Dark Angels Resurgence, and that is because A, absolutely beautiful models, and B, they are a pain in the backside to get rid of. So if you want to hear more about Dark Angels Deathwing Knights, then you can watch the previous episode of The Lion's Den. You can check out how I discuss all how great they are, what their bad matchups are, everything like that. I'm not going to bore you with that right now, but they're incredibly tanky, and they are so efficient in combat with that anti-vehicle, anti-monster mace, and that ability to do devastating wounds off of that great weapon. So really, really good ability. Honestly, never leave home without them, because the 2-up, 4-up, and the 4-up feel no pain to mortal wounds once per game is incredibly useful. So that's your Deathwing Knights, equipping with the maces and the great weapon on Sergeant. Then we have got our Hellblasters. So this is the one where I went the week before starting to play them going, no, they're rubbish, they're such a massive point sink, they're terrible. That was a Leviathan attitude. And it was correct in Leviathan. It is not correct anymore. The shift to a lot more close combat units and a lot more infantry over tanks has put Hellblasters sort of back in there and arguably one of our strongest units. So with your Hellblasters, they shoot on death on a 3-up, so if they overcharge and die, they shoot again, which is really, really handy. And one of the small niche rules, which is quite cool for the changing, was that instead of just like dying, now it's they take 3 mortal wounds if they overcharge. So a bit like how they used to for the characters. So now you can pop Azrael's Watcher and you can try and save them. You only save like 1 or 2, but if you've rolled like 5 ones, it can get really, really clutch. So really handy there. They spit out a huge amount of damage. 20 plasma shots at 24 inches is pretty difficult for most things to survive, especially when they are -3 to damage. They go through most things like a knife through butter, and they're also incredibly good as an Overwatch threat. Just having them in a position where you can go, okay, I'm going to control this entire area of the map, because whatever you do, wherever you move, or whatever you try and charge, I'll be able to Overwatch you with a unit which is likely to kill you, because there's enough of these dice that I'm chucking out that I will roll, say, into a 5-man squad. I roll 3 or 4 6s, and then suddenly that's 6 to 8 hits because of sustained hits, with 3 to 4 of them immediately wounding. So because you keep that really nice ability. One thing to remember is if you do die from overcharging in Overwatch, you are still hitting on 6s. Part of what Overwatch says when you do shoot again is that you change to only hitting on 6s for that phase, and that is part of that phase. So important to remember that. Okay, and then finally we're going to talk about our Inner Circle companions. Now these are my favourite models. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. I love the lore, and who doesn't like a massive sword just cleaving your opponent to pieces? So Inner Circle companions, they are 2 OC, which catches people out a heck of a lot of the time. Because of the Librarian, they've got a 4-up invulnerable save. Very, very handy. It's the thing that sort of makes them worth taking, in my opinion. I played them with the Judicar. It's just not survivable enough in the kind of metas that I am playing. They are 2 attack profiles. So you've got your sweep profile, which is 5 attacks, strength 6, AP 2, damage 1, sustained hits 2. And you've got your strike, which is the same profile, but instead of sustained hits, it is lethal hits. And instead of damage 1, it is damage 2. They're also -1 to hit and +1 to hit if they're going into a character unit. So they're -1 to hit, 4-up invulnerable save, and they've got 3 wounds. They are really quite tanky when your opponent tries to get into them. And with Honor the Chapter, they tend to just butcher whatever they go into. So really, really powerful unit. I'm a massive fan of these guys, and again, you give them that extra boost of movement coming out of the Impulsor. You then give them the advance and charge by calling that as part of Gladius. You go into your opponent and you cut them to shreds. So and the nice thing with the Inner Circle is when they then receive a charge back, because they've got a 4-up invuln, a lot of the time they're surviving what tries to crack back into them. Not all of them, but enough of them that you can then put a dent back basically for free, and then follow up either with that shooting threat or with the Deathwing Knights, which tend to be a little bit slower. Okay, so that's the list, and we're already 25 minutes in. So let's go to 2 RTTs that I recently played and how they went. So round 1, this is Peterborough Slam, phenomenal event run by Paul Bridge, who is a wonderful individual, although he is a Thousand Suns player, so but you can see here I was up against Orcs in the first round. Now I was playing on Purge the Foe, kill 1, kill more, Crucible of Battle, which is diagonal to centre, and Adapt or Die, which is redrawing of a secondary twice in the game for free. And I was against orcs in the Bully Boys detachment with some of the the classic threats: Gazcall, Mega Knobs, Knobs, Teleporting Boys, Storm Boys, all that kind of thing. Now, what my opponent did, which I was quite surprised about, was they put a heck of a lot in reserve. And that kind of let me dictate where I wanted to engage them and where I needed to be, so that then when they had that turn where they wanted to throw everything in, it was still going to be 9 inches away from me. Orcs kind of live and die on that war turn, so I was like, well, how can we nullify that war turn as much as possible? So if they're having to call the war and then come in reserves in their deployment zone because I've screened out the rest of the board, that's a massive win. And you can see that's kind of exactly what I did, which gave me the benefit to when I got to turn 4 and went, okay, I'm probably going to win this game. I need to work out how many points I'm going to score. I was able to get rid of an easy to score defend stronghold, toss that away, and go for a better to score secondary. So as you can see, that game ended 100-66. Makari did roll a 1 on his first attempt to save on his 2-up invulnerable save, which was real rough. Opponent very much struggled to make 9-inch charges on that turn, where I manipulated it so that they would have to try and make 9-inch charges, even though they'd ward. And that ultimately gave me the win. The Hellblasters were incredibly efficient, particularly in Overwatch, just eliminating those knobs really easily. And the nice thing was, because there weren't many ranged threats, I was able to put them in strategic reserve and not have Azrael with them. And then you just give them a nice little rapid ingress. And in this case, I think they rapid ingressed on turn 3, right in my opponent's backfield, and then just gun down units for fun. So really, really powerful if you're able to do that. This has been the only matchup where I haven't put Azrael with the Hellblasters. I will come on to that a little bit later on, if that was a mistake a little bit further on, actually towards the end of the video. But yeah, that kind of gives you an image of how important Azrael is when he goes with the Hellblasters, but doesn't have to. So we kicked off with 100-66, and we went into round 2. So obviously this is the one where I got to prep the most, because it's a round 1. You get that a couple of days in advance. You can chat with your teammates. Join Black Crow Gaming, we'll chat with you. And then yeah, it was a very positive game for me. So going into round 2. Now the score here, you're probably going, wow, that is a hell of a score. It's low scoring for both armies, truth be told, and you can see that is because it's supply drop. Now, disappearing objectives on supply drop, the alpha and omega objective, so the final objective gives you that 15, and if you hold those center objectives though, as you can see I kind of did, I got the 15 in turn 3 on primary, because I was able to dominate where those objectives were. Sweeping engagement, which is stepped Dawn of War, and hidden supplies. So Death Guard is a tough matchup because they've got a lot of fights first. They've got Blight Lords, which are very durable. Brigands with their +4 their Melter 4 is really good into Deathwing Knights, so very difficult to deal with there. But what I tried to manipulate was where and when my ICCs were going in. So I had the Hellblasters nail down one flank, and because there was quite little in terms of shooting on that flank, there was only one Plague Burst Crawler, and I'm saving on 3s, so okay, I'm not hugely scared of that. I was able to kind of manipulate it, so I was holding more objectives than I kind of deserved to, especially with that extra objective off of hidden supplies, and then my ICCs on the other flank were able to take down those small baby knights just through rolling 4-ups. I think the most important thing is that this list does it relies on rolling 4s, because you've got, for your difficult to kill threats, you've got +1 to wound from Honor the Chapter, which is going to give you that roll 4s to kill the big scary thing, or you've got to roll 4s to keep your guys alive. So the Deathwing Knights were able to hold that flank before I then brought the ICCs out, and they cleared up a lot of the problems around that area. So a lot of this mission was focused around where I could deny my opponent on primary, and you can see I was able to be quite successful with that because I focused on where can I go, right, you aren't scoring here. Where are these big blobs of Plague Marines going to have to either sit on an objective which is not close to that final objective, or how else do I sort of menace them so that they aren't able to do that sort of very Death Guardy thing of just slowly moving up and dealing with those units in combat. Because if they do get you in combat, they will kill you very, very efficiently, and you cannot charge them. That fight's first ability is absolutely brutal. However, what you need to leverage is your Hellblasters in this matchup, and you need to be able to get your Inner Circle companions into those positive fights with Deathwing Knights soaking up that damage. If you're able to do that, and you're able to get your opponent focusing on those units that you don't care about as much, / Deathwing Knights, then usually that becomes a slightly better matchup. So as you can see, as I say, low scoring. However, everyone's playing supply drop, so there's going to be low scoring games across the board, which was quite handy as we go into round 3, which is probably the most difficult game that I've played with this list so far, and that is against Drukhari. Now, a lot of you are probably going Drukhari and real Space Raiders. What on earth? Don't worry, that is the response of most people. However, Darren is one of the best players in the world with this particular list and with this particular faction. Works very closely with Skari and is very, very talented with the faction. He's got a very analytical brain. And I think at that point I was like 0 for 3 against him. He's a teammate as well. So he was also driving me that day. So this was always an entertaining one. In a final, on top scoring table at that point as well, going, well, if you beat me, I won't give you a lift home. Obviously he was going to. And we were playing Scorched Earth, and you can kind of see where I was able to kind of leverage that advantage. Now the key things that I was able to do was I was able to score a little bit more on primary just to edge me ahead, and then I was able to deny the odd secondary. So there were times when the Deathwing Knights were just able to get onto it. Well, they rolled a 9-inch charge, which was really important because it meant that I didn't get pinned in a particular corner for a turn, and then I was able to eventually sort of push that flank round, push it enough that I was able to get into a situation where I killed a heck of a lot more than I deserved to kill, particularly with Hellblasters taking down Talos. But the other very interesting thing here was the ICCs took a charge from Lilith and her witches, and they really benefited from having that 4-up invulnerable save and the 3 wounds that they've got as well, because they're in it's lots of 1 damage, high AP, which usually goes through Space Marines like there's no tomorrow. Absolutely brutal. But because they were able to, roll 4s, there was enough ICCs left that they then turned around and just wiped the witches, even though they've got a 4-up invuln, because they wounded them on 2s, picked them all up. So they were able to win that flank and secure that objective, secure that safe objective. So I'm always scoring hold 1, hold 2. Very important in this particular mission, and it allowed me to sort of then start dictating where I wanted to start burning objectives. Tipping Point was an interesting one because we were quite far away from each other, and Drukhari definitely have a speed advantage. But Talos and Kronos are quite slow a lot of the time, but they were able to kind of beeline for that centre. But because I was able to just sort of out-OC them enough, it delayed my opponent from scoring those key points, locked them up in combat, and the Hellblasters had a brilliant time just getting to sort of shoot what they want. They did all die, and I think they ended up sort of being absolutely massacred by a big Court of the Archon and Kabbalite unit in shooting. But because there was just so many opportunities for them to shoot in my opponent's turn, there was just a heck of a lot of points that they were able to get me. So that one ended at 90 to 79, and it actually gave me the win at Peterborough Slam, so you can read a slightly more in-depth tournament review of that on the Dark Angels group. I can send a link to that if you'd like. Just pop down a comment below. And that was a 3-0 and a first place for this Dark Angels list. And Peterborough Slam is one of the sort of most sharky tournaments that I've ever played in. The GTs are incredibly sharky, but if you go and have a look at the sort of the players that were there, there's a heck of a lot of top 3 faction players, including I think 10th in the UK / 5th in the world, Jack Tite, who is probably the best Sisters player at the moment. And I was able to just pip him to first place. Probably couldn't beat him if I played him, but I managed to dodge that matchup, so it is sometimes better to be lucky than it is to be good. But yeah, equally, being able to beat someone like Darren, whose only other loss was recently was to Josh Roberts in the shadow round of the Glasshammer GT. Those of you who don't know who Josh Roberts is, he writes the rules and is the best player in the world. So yeah, being able to take that win was incredibly satisfying for the list, and I think that list is very, very powerful, and I cannot wait to team up with Darren at the ITT in Hemel Hempstead. So keep an eye out for Crow Team 6 because there's going to be a few of us there. So let's move on to the next tournament, and that is the East Anglian Grand Tournament RTT 4, I think it was. So round 1, we were up against Necrons. Now, we were on Adapt to Die again. We were on Taking Hold and Sweeping Engagement. Opponent was playing a very warrior-heavy list, so looking to sit on centre objectives and just smother your opponent, while the Nightbringer, Scorpet Destroyers, and the Doomsday Ark sort of do that nasty shooting. However, in this matchup, I think I'm probably one of the worst matchups for that Necron list, because Inner Circle Companions are able to use their sweep attack against the Necrons. They're putting them onto a 6-up save, and they're going through them like a knife through butter. So that was very, very brutal. My opponent decided to opt for fixed objectives, fixed secondary objectives. Truth be told, I did say to them, "Are you sure you want to do that?" I honestly don't think that's the correct decision. I'm not saying this is your opponent that wants you to lose. I'm saying this is someone that wants to have a good game. And they did decide that no, they wanted to stick with the fixed on the premise that they had Adapt to Die. However, as you can see, I went first, and because I went first, I was able to immediately call the Assault Doctrine. They deployed a little bit too aggressively, and I was able to get some really brutal turn 1 charges, including the Scouts into the Destroyers, and the ICCs just killing one of the one of the Necron Warrior blobs alongside Imatech, the Stormlord. So really brutal turn 1, where basically one of the flanks just collapsed, did very little damage back to me, and then I was able to use my Deathwing Knights just to slow down the Scorpec Bomb and the Nightbringer. So I was able to engage them on my terms, and yes, in theory I probably could have held my opponent to a far lower score, but the way that I like to play is if my opponent has played a good game, they've played with the right attitude, and they've sort of been a good opponent, especially in a one-sided affair, I'll always try and support them to score as many points as possible once sort of the outcome has been decided. I personally view that as a really good way to play, and it just sort of it means that it's less likely to leave of a bad taste in your mouth. I know there are people that disagree with that, and absolutely fine. If you want to say no, final standings are done on points, you need to earn every point, more than fair, completely understand that too. But that's just my way that I like to play. And remember, this is Toy Soldiers. There is no completely right way to play, just as long as you're playing in a fair and fun manner. So we're going into round 2, and that is against the, I think now third Black Templar in the UK. So another phenomenal teammate. You will see me giving him lots of hugs. Usually one of us is slapping the other's bum as well, having a great time. and we were on search and destroy with 2 combat armies. So we were sort of staring at each other like this. Who's going to blink first? And praying that it was not the one that blinked first was going to be the one that ended up failing. Actually, I was the one that blinked first, but that was because I saw the opportunity to start pinning Corbyn in some key areas where I thought I could then get some movement advantages, and there'd been some dice rolls that had gone my way. For example, my screening units that were looking to deny primary, they had, they were still alive when they really shouldn't be. So I was in a really good spot there. Now, this was an interesting sort of Righteous Crusaders list that Corbyn was experimenting with. 5 up Feel No Pain, Terminator Brick, Grumaldus, obviously with the 5 up Feel No Pain, and then Sword Brethren with the Emperor's Champion and Hellbrett. So there's a heck of a lot of combat damage going out there, while also really tar-pitting your opponent. Now, this kind of really demonstrated that killing ability of this Gladius Dark Angels list, because the Inner Circle companions were able to carve up a flank on their own, including killing off Helbrecht and his Sword Brethren to then push, take and burn enemy home objective, alongside the other ICCs sort of getting me out of a sticky situation with those horrible 10 Terminators. They were Assault Terminators, so they have 4 wounds in that 5 up Feel No Pain, and my god, I've never seen someone roll so many 4 up saves. It was absolutely brutal, real slaughterfest in that centre, but the Dark Angels were had just about enough to edge that win and get to where they needed to be, just enough slowing down of my opponent and sort of engaging with them in those right areas, which then gave me those final points, so that I was able to get to that 97. Now, as you can see, over 2 games, I'm at 297. So again, my brain goes, "Ooh, we're on here," and then you find out, obviously, because you're on a high one, you're up against someone else who's on a really high score. Now, my opponent was on 200 points. Sorry, I was on 197, not 297. My opponent was on 200. So I knew it was going to be tough, and it's also another of my Hemel Hempstead ITT teammates, Sam Dickinson, who you'll also seen on the podcast with me. We've had a chat about that game as well previously, and as you can see, I narrowly managed to edge it. Now, I actually think I misplayed quite badly on this one. So we're on Purge, Crucible of Battle, Inspired Leadership, so kind of pretty standard, and I'm against the very classic World Eaters list, which is quite scary. Now, the reason that I think I misplayed was I deployed too far back, because I was so scared about how quickly Sam could get across the board and smack me to pieces. Luckily, I went second, and I was able to sort of leverage this advantage where I could go, okay, I know what you're going to do now. I just need to roll well enough to be able to stop you doing it. And that was slight high rolling. That did include some Deathwing Knights getting from my deployment zone to his home objective in 2 turns, because they're absolute chads. And they ended up picking up a squad of 8-bound and a squad of... no, it was the Juggerlord that was holding the home objective. But there was just a couple of key moments with key charges that went my way, where I had a short charge, which meant that I didn't need to base some 8-bound in the centre, which would have allowed a heroic intervention from a big blob of 8-bound. So that was really quite positive, because then when they came back and they absolutely slaughtered my Inner Circle companions on the backswing, although they did leave the Librarian alive, I was then able to go, right, here's the Hellblasters, they're going to pour fire in, goodbye. So there was just a couple of key moments that went my way, and Angron had to go back and kill the Deathwing Knights quite a lot of the time. Well, one time. But when he's out of the fight for 2 or 3 turns, I think he was only really able to have 2 meaningful fights. And that was because just forcing him to go around the board. He is so quick. There was a moment of real salt from me where I was like, sorry, how is he just jumping over that building like it's nothing? Sam tells the story far better, but my goodness, you could have opened a chip shop with the amount of salt coming out of me when I'm realising that Angron can just kind of almost breach. I'm like, the Lion's only just been able to do that. How can Angron do that? Absolute nonsense. But yeah, we narrowly were able to get there. There was a few moments where single models from units survived. So turn 1, a single scout survived on a wound. A Deathwing Knight survived on his own. There was lots of really key, important moments that massively helped me out there, which then ultimately led me winning 99 to 80. On the strength of those Deathwing Knight charges, I would say. Deathwing Knights are real good into World Eaters, but they need that backup of Hellblasters to keep your opponent honest, because otherwise they'll just go, cool, I'm just going to run at them and get them down with weight of attacks, or Angron. So that was another tournament win. There is, as with the last one, there is another in-depth video that you can go and watch, so do feel free to go and check that one out. And now we're going to talk about Sheffield Super Major. So, standard UKTC, slightly older mission pack. I was using the Lion instead of the Hellblasters, and I was up against Chaos Demons, which was one of the Dead Red Gaming's first team. Gentleman named Steve, really nice bloke. Had a great game against him. Going into it, I was like, okay, well, this guy is higher ranked than me. This is going to be tough. Big shout out to my lovely friend Luke Townsend from Redacted, who gave me a ring, went on the phone with me for 45 minutes just to kind of plan this matchup. Deathwing Knights were incredible. One of the masters spiked on his dev wounds just to put so many wounds into a great unclean one. It was beautiful. Now, the Lion was quite key in this matchup because the Lion was able to rapid ingress and then heroically intervene with his Fight's First ability into Skull Taker and 10 Bloodletters, which stopped my opponent from stealing my home objective and menacing my backfield. He then didn't really do anything else for the rest of the game, but that was really important, just to be able to go, okay, I know that's your Hail Mary, I know that's where you're going to unseat me and cause me problems. But the Lion was great there. Then I was up against Nids, so the ICCs really came into their own in this one, absolutely chopping those huge Nids to pieces, but more importantly, I would say, Deathwing Knights, which is so survivable against the Nids, that it made life very difficult. And then finally, I was up against Imperial Guard. I only got the 3 games in the Sheffield Super Major because unfortunately I got food poisoning. But I was against Triple Dawn and Stormtrooper spam. Again, it was on Supply Drop, which has now been dropped out of the UKTC mission pack, which I think is probably a good call, because the Dawns... Well, I think my opponent made a key error where they didn't realise how quickly I could get up the board. And I was able to get my ICCs into his Lord Solar Leonatus unit turn 1. And they didn't manage to kill Lord Solar, but they did manage to kill the entire unit, including the Master Vox. And if the Master Vox is dead, he can't issue his orders all the way across the board, having his great time where suddenly those Rogal Dawns are hitting on 4s. And because there's so much -1 to hit in this list, suddenly they're just not hitting you. So, well, they are hitting on you, but they're hitting you on 5s, which is real rough. So that was also a really good game for the Dark Angels. And the Lion's 3-up invulnerable save actually mattered in that one because it turned out I could roll a 3-up in that game. Who'd have thought? So that was another 3-0. But it didn't quite have that edge that it now has with the Hellblasters. The Lion is brilliant. I love the Lion because I'm a Dark Angels player. Who doesn't love the Lion? You can't really say you're a Dark Angels player if you don't absolutely adore the Lion. But Hellblasters, in terms of gameplay, just give you that extra. Yes, rapid ingress heroic intervention is phenomenal on a Fight's First unit that usually liquidizes most opponents. But that Overwatch and Shoot on Death to just decimate your opponent in their turn and to have more of a threat range where they're having to make harder decisions because of this unit, that even if they kill them, sometimes they're shooting back, all those kinds of abilities, it really just sort of elevates the list and gives it that extra dynamic where they can threaten your opponent. So, final takeaways for the list. Lowest score was 83. Average score 94.83, and the highest score was 100. In terms of scoring in Prior Nexus, we know it's got harder, and like damn, it is hard. If I look at some of my games from early Prior Nexus, it was incredibly difficult to get close to that 100, and it wasn't until I started playing this particular list that I started scoring those hundreds. The list is extremely efficient at scoring because it's very killy for the killy secondaries, it's very movable for getting around the board, and it has those cheap throwaway units that it can just go, okay, I need that to do a secondary, it's gone, I don't care, I'm backing it up with an ICC unit to kill whatever kills that screening or scoring unit. Best deployment, shockingly, because it's a combat army, is Search and Destroy. Who'd have thought? You want to be close to your opponent and run at them. So yeah, Search and Destroy, absolutely the best deployment. Really good for our Infiltrate as well. It's worth bearing in mind that your opponent can infiltrate block you, so just be aware of that. But yeah, I like it. Crucible of Battle is the furthest one away, so that is our worst one. It's a bit of a pain in the bum when you're that far away from your opponent, but that does depend a little bit on the terrain of where you can stage. If there's good staging areas, then actually that one can go very quickly the other way. I found that with Tipping Point against the Drakari. I wasn't really able to get to grips with them as much as I would like. I felt like I was quite far away, and that we were kind of fighting a little bit more on the flanks. So really interesting game. But yeah, I would say that is our worst deployment. Now, best matchup, I would definitely say armies like Orcs or Necrons in that Awakened Dynasty, where they are 1 wound models, lots of them, and they don't like making armor saves. So they're durable because they're, say, T5 or they have reanimation protocols. But they die very quickly to Inner Circle companions. It's very difficult when I talk about best and worst matchups because the list is so efficient that it doesn't have any horrendous matchups. And there's yet to be a game where, like Thousand Suns in the previous Leviathan mission pack, where I just go, oh, it's Thousand Suns, this is probably a 70-30 chance that I'll lose this one. But in our worst matchups, we're going to talk about Death Guard because, well, actually, to be honest, what's summed up really well with this is Death Guard, Drakari, and World Eaters all have really efficient and really good fights first options. So your Master of Executions with his 10 Zerkers, your Lilith Hesperax with her 10 Witches or Court of the Archon with the Cabalites, and Death Guard, obviously, Plague Marine Blobs. Very, very efficient. So, anything with that like efficient fights first. So if you are going up against loads of Dark Angels, maybe you want that Judicar in there, just so you can go, okay, I'm going to have my ICCs here. You're sure they've got your 4-up invuns. I'm just going to make you roll loads and loads of dice though, and they are going to fall over eventually. So yeah, fights first is probably our worst matchup. The other thing that I'm interested in testing against, and that I haven't had the opportunity yet, and I will be doing soon, is Necrons in Hypercrypt and Grey Knights. So the sort of the speedy armies that can jump up and jump down. Now, traditionally, Space Marines liked those kinds of matchups because they could go, okay, I have infiltrators, I can screen you out, I can make this infiltrator unit alone up. Now, because of how tight our points are, that is something that we do sacrifice. So there is the potential that your opponent can get in behind you, and we are benefiting from the fact that more and more armies aren't looking at 3-inch deep strike options. They aren't looking at you know, they wanted to start on the board a lot more, you know, and the ones that do 3-inch deep strike, like I think it's the Trigon out of Tyranids, cool, come out, do your mortal wounds, I'll pop my Watcher, I'll then countercharge you and kill your big scary monster. Fine. So that's definitely a benefit, but that is also where I see a potential weakness. So fights first, and super movable armies taking advantage of up-down abilities. But equally, those usually come at both a premium, and they are kind of fixed in a certain way of playing. And your Hellblasters are really efficient at disrupting that way of playing, particularly with that Overwatch ability. Okay, well, that is going to take us towards the end. We're nearly an hour in, so if you're still watching, congratulations. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. We gained nearly 100 subscribers from the last Lion's Den, which was incredible. I'm going to be releasing a video every Thursday at about 7 PM going forward. Come chat to us though. We want to see you on our Facebook, we want to see you on our Instagram and in our Discord. Provide feedback in the comments. I read every single comment. I will try and reply to every single comment. And if you want to get in contact with me directly, absolutely fine. And if you see me at a UKTC tournament or any other tournament for that matter, come up and say hi. I'm going to be at the LGT. Probably, spoiler alert, playing this list because it's real good. So I did have one of my friends, Greg Chamberlain, go, you know, you're giving away all the ways to beat you by doing these videos, right? And I was like, yeah, just hoping that no one's going to tech for me. So please don't tech for me, because you probably then won't coming up playing me. It'll be sod's law that we will play, but don't tech for me, you evil bastards. But yeah, this has been episode 2 of the Lion's Den. I have been Toby Bennett from Black Crow Gaming. Please like, subscribe, and comment down below how you thought this video has gone. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Keep roaring, Dark Angels.